flowers? Where did these come from? How strange. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of a saint. She's called Saint Therese of Lisieux, also known as the Little Flower. Let me tell you something little more about her. Crystal, did you throw these flowers at me?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was telling our friends over here that these flowers reminded me of a saint. She's called Saint Therese of Lisieux, also known as the Little Flower. So have you heard about Saint Therese's or Saint Therese of Lisieux?
Well, I know a little bit about her because my school is called St. Teresa's.
Yes, you have a good point there. Also, the church nearby that we go to sometimes is also called St. Teresa's, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So what do you know about her?
I know that she died at the age of 24 because she had this type of sickness.
Yes, that's right. She did die pretty young. So she was a girl who grew up in France, and at the age of 15 she became a religious nun. So she became a sister in the convent.
Okay.
Yes, at the age of 15. That's pretty young, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a few years older than Cheta. So, yes, so she became a sister at the age of 15. She entered the Carmelite convent in Lisieux and gave her whole life to God. Joining the convent allowed her to live a hidden and simple life of prayer. She was gifted with great intimacy with God. What do you think intimacy with God means, Crystal?
Like privacy with God and time with God?
Time with God. I think the second one is a pretty good answer. Intimacy with God means, you have a good relationship with God, or you're constantly speaking to God, and then you're kind of always thinking, oh, what would God want me to do? You have a good connection with God. That's what intimacy means. So because Saint Therese lived in a convent, she lived a quiet and peaceful life. She lived a life of prayer, which allowed her to spend lots of time with God. So she was able to form a good relationship with God. Yeah. So it wasn't all sunflowers and daisies. She actually became quite sick with a disease called tuberculosis. Like you mentioned earlier, she died at the age of 24 with this disease. But through the sickness and dark nights of doubt and fear, she remained faithful to God, and she was rooted in His merciful love. After a long struggle with tuberculosis, she died on September the 30th at the age of 24.
Okay.
Do you know what, Crystal? There's actually a Bible verse that reminds me of Saint Teresa a lot. Should we have a look?
Yeah, I'll go get the Bible.
Okay, thank you. So it's actually, you can find this Bible verse in the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 3. Okay? So Matthew is in the New Testament, so it's towards the end of the Bible, and it's chapter 18. Here we are, and it's verse 3. Okay? Would you like to read this out for us, Crystal? Nice and loud, okay?
Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yes, that's right. So I'll just read it one more time. It says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay. So it says here, Jesus says here, we have to become like children. Now, I don't really think I'm a child anymore. So I don't think I can, I'm not really I'm not really a child anymore. But Crystal, you can tell me how it's like being a child. So tell me, how is it like for you being a child?
Sometimes it's really fun, but also it's sometimes very hard and like in homework and everything.
Ah, why is it hard in homework?
It's just I find it tricky, and sometimes I can't figure out the question in maths. And
Yeah. Oh, and I guess that you would need someone to help you, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes. I guess like with a lot of, you said it's quite fun, being a child, but I guess a lot of the times you need you need some help, don't you?
Yeah.
So what kind of things that do you need help with, except from your homework?
Sometimes when I ride my bike, I need help.
Yes, you do.
Sometimes when I'm
Do you cook? Do you cook, Crystal?
no,
No. So what happens when you get hungry?
I ask
Yes.
to get me food.
I know, and it's usually Papa or Mummy that, makes the food for you as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So like even like basic things like, eating and drinking, and even if you wanted to go somewhere or if you wanted to buy something for yourself, you can't really do that for yourself, can you? Because as a child, we don't have that kind of skills and that kind of power and ability to do a lot of things. So a lot of the times, I imagine that you rely on all grown-ups to help you, don't you?
Yeah.
Yes. So like that, I think Saint Teresa had that kind of relationship with God, with Jesus. She saw herself as God's child, and she depended on God for everything. For she invited God into her life for all the little things that she did, and she constantly asked for God's help and God's presence. So sometimes when you're doing something, you even though you don't need anyone to watch you, you like to call us over and make us watch you do something.
Yeah.
Maybe it might be like watch you do a drawing, or what else do you do, like if you,
Riding.
bike riding. Yeah, if you're riding your bike and you just like us to watch you, don't you? So like that, Saint Teresa always asked for God's presence in everything she does. All the little things she does, she gave it lots of love, and she almost invited God's presence to be there with her, almost like how you invite us to come and watch you and be with you. So this is the kind of relationship that Saint Teresa had with Jesus. It was almost like she was a child, and it was almost like she was a child, which depended on God for everything she did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let me end this lesson with a sentence that Saint Teresa wrote in her book called The Story of the Soul. She wrote like this: "What matters in life is not great deeds, but great love." I really like that. I really like that. What do you think that means though, Crystal?
I have no idea. Could you tell me?
Of course I can tell you. What I think it means is, it's basically, it's saying here, it's not great deeds, but great love. That's what matters in life, yeah? So, by great deeds, I think what she means is, she's not saying that we have to go out and build a home for the homeless. We have to go out and feed all the hungry people.
So does that mean we can't do anything until the poor people and everything?
No, we can't do that. But she's telling us we don't have to do great things beyond our capacity. So if I wanted to go and build a house for someone, could I do that?
No.
No, like that's beyond my ability, isn't it? Like as much as a homeless person needs a home, I can't build a house for them. See, so like that, it's not telling me to go and do things that I can't do. It's not telling me to go and do things that are beyond my powers, but it's telling us to do what I can do with great love. So what I can do is perhaps, when I'm on my way to work or something, and if I see a homeless person, what I can do is I can give them, I can give them some money for breakfast. I can say to them, can I get something for you from the shop? Or things like that I can do within my own power. Yeah. So this is saying basically do those things. So do what I can do with great love, like you mean it. Not like, oh, I'm giving it to you because I have to, but because you mean to help that person and you really want to. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it means. It's not about great deeds, but it's about great love. It's about how much love you put into your action and how much thought and meaning you have behind everything you do, rather than the thing you actually do. That's what really counts. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Let this flower be a reminder to us this week to be a little flower in our day-to-day lives, and to do things with great love.
Marie Francois Thérèse Martin was born on January 2nd, 1873, and baptized 2 days later on January 4th. 21-year-old Thérèse described her earliest memories of home life in France.
All my life, God surrounded me with love. My first memories are imprinted with the most tender smiles and caresses. Those were the sunny years of my childhood.
Generations of Catholics who have admired this young saint called her the Little Flower, and found in her short life more inspiration for their own lives than in volumes written by theologians. Yet Thérèse died when she was only 24 years old, after having lived as a cloistered Carmelite nun for less than 10 years. She never went on missions, never founded a religious order, never performed great works. The only book of hers, published after her death, was a brief edited version of her journal called Story of a Soul. Within 28 years of her death, the public demand was so great that she was finally canonized. Thérèse was born in Lisieux, France, 1873, the pampered daughter of a mother, a talented lace maker, who had wanted to be a saint, and a father, a watchmaker by trade, who had wanted to be a monk. The two married, but were determined that they would be celibate, until a priest told them one day that that was not how God wanted a marriage to work. Within the next 15 years, Zélie Martin bore 9 children, 7 girls and 2 boys.
We lived only for them. They were all our happiness. Zélie Martin.
The Martins' delight in their children turned to shock and sorrow as tragedy relentlessly and mercilessly stalked their little ones. Within 3 years, Zélie's 2 baby boys, a 5-year-old girl and a 6.5-week-old infant girl, all died. Zélie was left numb with sadness, but her faith sustained her through these terrible ordeals. In a letter to her sister-in-law who had lost an infant son, Zélie remembered,
When I closed the eyes of my dear little children and buried them, I felt sorrow through and through. People said to me, it would have been better never to have had them. I couldn't stand such language. My children were not lost forever. Life is short and full of miseries, and we shall find our little ones again, up above.
The Martins' last child was born January 2nd, 1873. She was weak and frail, and doctors feared for the infant's life. The family, now so used to death, was preparing for yet another blow. Zélie wrote of her 3-month-old girl,
I have no hope of saving her. The poor little thing suffers horribly. It breaks your heart to see her.
But the baby girl proved to be much tougher than anyone realized and survived the illness. And a year later,
The baby is full of life, giggles a lot, and is sheer joy to everyone.
death seemed to grant a reprieve to the Martin household. Although suffering had left its mark on mother and father, it was not the scar of bitterness. Louis and Zelly had already found relief and support in their faith. The series of tragedies had intensified the love of Louis and Zelly Martin for each other. They poured out their affections on their 5 surviving daughters. Louis and Zelly named their newborn Marie-Francoise Thérèse Martin. A century later, people would know her as Saint Thérèse and call her the Little Flower. Tragedy and loss came quickly to Thérèse when her mother died of breast cancer when she was only 4.5 years old. Her 16-year-old sister Pauline became her second mother, which made the second loss even worse when Pauline entered a Carmelite convent 5 years later. A few months later, Thérèse became so ill with a fever that people thought she was dying. When Thérèse saw her sisters praying to a statue of Mary in her room, Thérèse also prayed. She saw Mary smile at her, and suddenly she was cured. She tried to keep the grace of the cure secret, but people found out and badgered her with questions about what Mary was wearing, what she looked like. When she refused to give in to their curiosity, they said that she had made the whole thing up. Without realizing it, by the time she was 11 years old, she had developed a habit of mental prayer. She would find a place between her bed and the wall, and in that solitude think about God, life, and eternity. When her other sisters, Marie and Leonie, had left to join the religious orders, Thérèse was left alone with her last sister Celine and her father. Thérèse tells us that she wanted to be good, but that she had an odd way of going about it. This little spoiled queen of her father's would not do any housework. She thought that if she made the beds, she was doing a great favor. Every time Thérèse even imagined that someone was criticizing her or did not appreciate her, she would burst into tears. Then she would cry because she had cried. Any inner wall she built to contain her wild emotions crumpled immediately before the tiniest comment. Thérèse wanted to enter the Carmelite convent to join Pauline and Marie, but how could she convince others that she could handle the rigors of Carmelite life if she could not handle her own emotional outbursts? She had prayed that Jesus would help her, but there was no sign of an answer. On Christmas Day in 1886, the 14-year-old hurried home from church. In France, young children left their shoes by the hearth at Christmas, and then parents would fill them with gifts. By 14, most children outgrew this custom, but her sister Celine did not want Thérèse to grow up, so they continued to leave presents in baby Thérèse's shoes. As she and Celine climbed the stairs to take off their hats, their father's voice rose up from the parlor below. Standing over the shoes, he sighed.
Thank goodness, that's the last time we should have this kind of thing. Louis Martin.
Something incredible had happened to Thérèse. Jesus had come into her heart and done what she could not do herself. He made her more sensitive to her father's feelings than her own. She swallowed her tears, walked slowly down the stairs, and exclaimed over the gifts in the shoes, as if she had never heard a word her father had said. The following year, she entered the convent. In her autobiography, she referred to this Christmas as her conversion. Thérèse would be known as the Little Flower, but she had a will of steel. When the superior of the Carmelite convent refused to take Thérèse because she was so young, the formerly shy little girl went to the bishop. And when the bishop also said no, she decided to go over his head as well. Her father and sister took her on a pilgrimage to Rome to try to get her mind off this crazy idea. Finally, they went for an audience with the Pope. They had been forbidden to speak to him, but that didn't stop Thérèse. As soon as she got near him, she begged that he let her enter the Carmelite convent. She had to be carried out by 2 of the guards. But the vicar general, who had seen her courage, was impressed, and soon Thérèse was admitted to the Carmelite convent that her sisters Pauline and Marie had already joined. Her romantic ideas of convent life and suffering soon met up with reality in a way she had never expected. Her father suffered a series of strokes that left him affected not only physically but mentally. When he began hallucinating and grabbed for a gun as if going into battle, he was taken to an asylum for the insane. Horrified, Thérèse learned of the humiliation of the father she adored and admired, and of the gossip and pity of their so-called friends. As a cloistered nun, she could not visit her father. This began a horrible time of suffering when she experienced such dryness in prayer that she stated,
Jesus isn't doing much to keep the conversation going.
She was so grief-stricken that she often fell asleep in prayer. She consoled herself by saying that mothers love children when they lie asleep in their arms, so that God must love her when she slept during prayer. She knew as a Carmelite nun she would never be able to perform great deeds.
Love proves itself by deeds. So how am I to show my love? Great deeds are forbidden me. The only way I can prove my love is by scattering flowers. And these flowers are every little sacrifice, every glance and word, and the doing of the least actions for love.
She took every chance to sacrifice, no matter how small it would seem. She smiled at the sisters she didn't like. She ate everything that she was given without complaining, so much so that she was often given the worst leftovers. One time she was accused of breaking a vase when she was not at fault. Instead of arguing, she sank to her knees and begged forgiveness. These little sacrifices cost her more than bigger ones, for those went unrecognized by others. No one told her how wonderful she was for these little secret humiliations and good deeds. When her sister Pauline was elected prioress, she asked Thérèse for the ultimate sacrifice. Because of politics in the convent, many of the sisters feared that the Martin family would take over the convent. Therefore, Pauline had asked Thérèse to remain a novice in order to allay the fears of the others that the three sisters would push everyone else around. This meant she would never be a fully professed nun, that she would always have to ask permission for everything she did. This sacrifice was made a little sweeter when her sister Celine entered the convent after her father's death. 4 of the sisters were now together once again. Thérèse continued to worry about how she could achieve holiness in the life she led. She did not want to be just good, she wanted to be a saint. She thought there must be a way for people living hidden little lives like hers.
I feel in me the vocation of the priest. I have the vocation of the apostle. Martyrdom was the dream of my youth, and this dream has grown with me. Considering the mystical body of the church, I desired to see myself in them all. Charity gave me the key to my vocation. I understood that the church had an art, and that this art was burning with love. I understood that love comprised all vocations, that love was everything, that it embraced all times and places. In a word, that it was eternal. Then, in the excess of my delirious joy, I cried out, "Oh Jesus, my love, my vocation, at last I have found it. My vocation is love."
When an antagonist was elected prioress, new political suspicions and plotting sprang up. The concern over the Martin sisters perhaps was not exaggerated. In this small convent, they now made up 1/5 of the population. Despite this, and the fact that Thérèse was a permanent novice, they put her in charge of the other novices. Then, in 1896, she became ill. She kept working without telling anyone until she became so sick a year later that everyone knew it. Worst of all, she had lost her joy and confidence and felt she would die without leaving anything behind. Her sister Pauline already had her writing down her memoirs and wanted her to continue so they would have something to circulate on her life after her death. Thérèse's pain was so great that she said if she had not had faith, she would have taken her own life without hesitation. But she tried to remain smiling and cheerful, and succeeded so well that some thought she was only pretending to be ill. Her one thing she wanted to be able to do after her death, helping those here on earth. Thérèse died on September 30th, 1897, at the age of 24. She herself felt it was a blessing that God had allowed her to die at exactly that age. She had always felt that she had a vocation to be a priest, and felt God let her die at the age she would have been ordained if she had been a man, so that she would not have to suffer.
I will return. My heaven will be spent on earth.
After she died, everything at the convent went back to normal. But her sister Pauline had put together Thérèse's writings and sent 2,000 copies to other convents. But Thérèse's little way of trusting in Jesus to make her holy and relying on small daily sacrifices instead of great deeds appealed to the thousands of Catholics and others who were trying to find holiness in ordinary lives. Within 2 years, the Martin family had to move because her notoriety was so great, and by 1925, she had been canonized. Thérèse of Lisieux is one of the patron saints of the missions, not because she ever went anywhere, but because of her special love of the missions and the prayers and letters she gave in the support of missionaries. This is a reminder to all of us who feel that we can do nothing, that it is the little things that keep God's kingdom growing.